Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. And with me, as always, on Seahawks Saturdays with Jeff Simmons. Wouldn't be really the same show without Jeff Simmons actually here. At Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. Jeff, man, how are you doing, dude?
Man, I'm good. It just kind of hit me like the preseason's over after tonight. Season starts in 2 weeks. It's pretty crazy how just that whole thing just flew by. It felt like I'm coming out to see you guys in 2 weeks, so it's getting crazy.
It is crazy, man. It's it's crazy to me that I can't, preseason is so confusing to me now. It used to be very regimented where you'd see certain progressions of when starters were used and when they weren't. It is like open season across the NFL. When teams are playing starters, how they're playing starters, how long they're playing starters. And the Seahawks tonight, we're going to see our starting offense, at least some of it, for the first time this preseason. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing them play, but I'm also like, let's put them in bubble wrap and let's just get to week one.
I know that's kind of how I feel too. It's like there used to be a natural progression where they'd play a series, and the next game they'd play a half, and the next game they'd play three quarters, and the fourth game they would sit. And now it's every team does it differently. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And when you do see them, it's a very vanilla, watered down version of what you expect to see. Obviously, it's going to be nice to see Gino out there with some of the guys, but number one thought getting out of this game is that just everyone comes out healthy. And
yeah,
I understand why they're coaches that just some teams want to see some full speed reps before. Funny enough, Baltimore has been one of the more successful preseason teams. They've handled it better than anyone. That's where McDonald was with. So maybe I got to give him the benefit of the doubt, but Howell's been pretty watchable in these two games. So I wouldn't have minded at all if Gino and those guys didn't play and just go out and don't show anything for that before that opener.
Yeah, well, it is also pouring rain
in
Seattle right now.
Oh, dude.
It's supposed to stop by midday, and the game is so late. I think it's wild that the Browns, I would not want to be a Browns fan who had any interest in this game that starts at 10 o'clock at night or whatever.
I'm going to watch it.
That's rough. It's a late game. And I think it should, hopefully it'll stop raining, but it's just a weird it feels like a fall day. It very much feels, I got my full sweatshirt on, man, flannels, and it's August. So I think it's supposed to get back in the 80s next week. And hopefully by the time you get here, it'll still be good weather. Usually early in the season it is, but let's hope everyone gets out of here healthy, for sure. Some news, dude. Since the last time you and I talked, Seahawks made a couple trades, and one of them was trading Mike Jackson for Michael Barrett. The other one was trading Daryl Taylor for a 6th round pick. What were your thoughts on those moves?
Pretty obvious moves from the Seahawks standpoint. I didn't think Taylor was going to make the team. I always thought that he was a strange fit with McDonald. When they brought him back, I was surprised. I didn't know if that was just the front office kind of flexing. We drafted this guy. Let's see how he does. Knowing the kind of players they liked in Baltimore, I never really understood the fit with Taylor. He's sort of like the one-dimensional player. And the more we've gone to learn McDonald, he really wants serious football guys. And Taylor, to his credit, he has a pretty unique skill set in terms of the rest of the edge group. But every time I see a team video, and you've been around the team, he kind of seems a little immature. He kind of seems a little goofy. He just never struck me as the kind of guy Mike McDonald would want. So when we were looking at the numbers, and Draymond Jones hasn't been around much, but he was playing edge, I always thought this guy's kind of an odd fit. He might be a game day inactive. He might be where's the role for him? And then some of the younger pass rushers have started to emerge. So I thought he was going to get cut, frankly. I know there was a lot of upset people seeing the 6th round pick. And listen, given his draft status and what we all thought of him after 2021, he seemed like a building block. He is a backup rotational rusher with no club control. That's what they go for. And so, funny enough, a bunch of us were getting in fights with this guy, Greg Gabriel, yesterday, who's a former scout with the Bears, because he thought it was some Seattle fan narrative that he's not good against the run, which is the most obvious. It'd be like saying Jamal Adams isn't like someone getting mad at me for saying Jamal Adams isn't good in coverage. It's players have skill sets and they have limitations. And so some of the reaction to the Taylor trade and something like that anger and like, I can't believe, like I think Matty Brown was like, that trade was stupid. I completely am on the other end of that. I thought that's the guy you're going to cut. I was surprised they even got a 6th round for him. I didn't think there'd be a market for him. The Mike Jackson one, same kind of thing. The numbers there were kind of odd. I think you had identified him as a trade candidate very early.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought the return was kind of interesting. I think that was the equivalent of getting like a flyer draft pick anyway. And now they get a guy they know at a position they need. So I thought both trades were pretty smart. And I think getting anything for Daryl Taylor, to me, that's his value. This is the open market. He's a backup player in one of the worst defenses in the NFL last year. So I was not in the camp of like they should have got a 3rd round pick or something like that.
Yeah, I saw Maddie's tweet. I think his first tweet was, I checked this a few times to see if it was a fake account because this is a terrible trade for Seattle. And admittedly, like I wrote 3 articles yesterday, did a pod, doing like all sorts of things. So I'm not keeping up on everything, but then it sounded like people were kind of freaking out about this trade and felt, I don't know, some kind of way about it. Look, I've been a Daryl Taylor defender relative to most, but you know who he is. Like, he is a guy that will get sacks in bunches, can actually get some strip sacks in bunches as well, which is a good thing. But he's not a guy that does it. He's never, even at his best, been a consistent pass rushing threat. He just hasn't been. And not only that, Daryl Taylor is one of those odd examples of somebody who has a higher, like a decent sack rate, but a pretty unimpressive pressure rate. And so he, like, of his sack to pressure rate, like, is probably among the highest. And for people that aren't following along, right, like, you can have people that are constantly applying pressure to the quarterback, but their percentage of actual pressures that turn into sacks is lower because they have high volume pressures, and maybe sacks, a lot of people say, are not necessarily even that much different than a pressure if it's an effective pressure. Well, Daryl Taylor is kind of the opposite, where his volume of pressures was not that high, but he got home. When he was going to get a pressure, a lot of the times it turned into a sack. And that just made him a boom or bust kind of guy. I think it made him someone who excelled against certain matchups and not against others. I thought he had a lot of talent, but to me, he never truly reached that potential. Maybe he will with the Bears. I have nothing against Daryl Taylor. I'm not rooting against him. But this notion that this was some terrible deal is weird to me. And I mean, yes, would I've liked more like a higher pick? Of course.
Yeah.
I had I literally predicted him yesterday morning before the trade to be traded to the Titans for Keandre Coburn, who was a 6th round pick last year. So it didn't seem out of the realm to me at all. And yeah, so I'll stop there because you look like you're going to say something.
No, yeah, the thing with Taylor is I actually think he might be better in Chicago, like the way Matty Eberflus runs, like that speed 4-3 defense, with what McDonald wants to do. Where, and I've heard someone said this so well. I think it was Shell Capadia was talking about this. Is they use they send 4 guys going to the quarterback. They don't send a lot of blitzes, and so what makes McDonald's defense work really well is you can't have one-dimensional players, because you have got the hard thing to figure out with McDonald is 4 guys are going. They had the most sacks in the year and one of the lowest blitz rates. I remember you talked about this. What Shell said is they have 4 guys going. But if Daryl Taylor's on the field, you kind of know what he's doing, and it kind of hurts. And so why Seattle is really versatile, that Draymond Jones is probably why those guys are so excited to work with him. They have a more wide-ranging skill sets. And Nwosu, really good with that. Derek Hall, really good with that. I always just found Taylor to be an odd fit. So maybe he goes to Chicago where he just rushes upfield, and that's fine for him. But from the Seattle standpoint, there's just Sure, you could have held him, and it has depth at the edge rusher. If someone gets hurt, then you bump him up. But if he wasn't going to make the team, I didn't even see that any of this till Evan wrote us that like people are really upset about this. I think if you're upset about this, you're not following the league that closely. Like teams want guys that have club control. They want guys that are either proven or well versatile. Daryl Taylor's a backup situational pass rusher on the last year of his deal. So expecting to get more because he was drafted high or was good in 2021 or flashed, that's just showing a misunderstanding of trade value.
The other part of this that's been out there is I saw various accounts talking about the Seahawks are now thin at the edge. They're in trouble on the edge. I don't know if I'm like on an island here, but I mean, help me remember, Jeff. I mean, generally, there's been seasons where the Seahawks have had essentially a 3-man rotation at edge, and the fourth guy is barely getting on the field. They have what I see as this pretty solid 4-man rotation with Draymond Jones, Chenna Nwosu, Boye Mafe, and Derek Hall. All of them bring various good things to the table. I'm like struggling to understand why they're thin at edge. Do you see it?
Yeah, like I was thinking about like the 2013 team the other day, and that's the deepest roster we'll probably ever see again in our lifetime for Seattle. So if you go through the numbers, they had Cliff Averill, they had Chris Clemens, and who was Bruce Irvin? Those were the 3 edge rushers. And I think like the next one was like O'Brien Schofield or anything like that.
That's a good name.
And like I know I looked it up, I wouldn't have remembered that, but that's the deepest team we've ever seen in Seattle. That's 3 edge rushers, and Bruce Irvin was playing base at Sam linebacker. So they didn't have a 4th guy. So in the deepest roster we've ever seen. So now all of a sudden we're coming back and we're saying there's no depth because there's only 3 guys. And
there's 4 guys.
And there's 4 guys. And that's the point. There's 4 guys. Draymond Jones, people seem to be forgetting, he slimmed down. The whole reason they're putting him is because in this defense, we always thought it was an awkward fit. They developed a passer rush position in their depth chart called rush for him. So he's the starter on that depth chart. And so I'm with you. I didn't really understand that. I think it's them being comfortable with Derek Hall. I think that's what this trade also indicates. I think that Derek Hall is one of the 3 that they're comfortable with. And I'm with you. They have young guys on the practice squad potentially that could add depth, like Jamie Sheriff has shown a lot in recent weeks. And Nelson Caesar was a guy I thought would challenge Daryl Taylor. I haven't seen much from him. I don't know if you've seen differently in practice, but yeah, I'm with you. I think if you compare it to like where, like did Baltimore have 4 consistent edge rushers last year in their defense? I can't think of 4.
I don't think so.
And then the Seahawks have 4. Dre Jones is an edge rusher.
Yeah, that's the other. I think that's maybe the piece that people see differently. Like I was even talking with someone on Twitter this morning or whatever it was about Draymond Jones, and like, yeah, he's not that good and he's not really an edge. I mean, he played edge for the last like 8 games of last year once Leonard Williams arrived, and all of his numbers improved. Every single one. His run defense, his pass rush, his pressure rate, everything went up. And that was at 275 in a defense that was terrible. Now you put him in Mike McDonald's defense, slim down, to play a Jadeveon Clowney-like role where Jadeveon Clowney had a career year as a pass rusher playing this position. Like, everyone talks about Draymond Jones like he's trash. He had like 45 pressures last year, 4.5 sacks. It's not like, oh my God, that's amazing. But he was not a nothing. And he was a good edge setter against the run as well. So not every edge player needs to be a 10-sack guy. Like, when you have somebody who can be an effective player, just setting the edge as a run defender and then being an occasional pass rusher, that's an important role. And so like everyone doesn't need to be Lawrence Taylor off the edge to be part of that rotation. So I think there's a significant amount of misunderstanding about what Draymond Jones will be. And I think I get it because he's been injured this preseason and hasn't gotten any snaps. He won't play tonight. I do think he'll be ready for Denver, and you go from there. So I think the Draymond Jones thing still throws people. I think people are always going to be pissed about how much money he's making. For me, I just don't care. Once the die's been cast, once the money's been spent, I'm not going to sit here and freak out about it. I just want, most effective play out of him we can. And I think that he's set up to do that in this defense.
Yeah, and he's in a year where if he doesn't do well, they can move on. They made it a little harder financially, but they're still in a position where he's playing for his future in Seattle. So I don't think it's worth getting upset about it. It's a 1-year thing, and we'll see.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Jamie Sheriff and Nelson Caesar. I mean, Caesar had a very steady, if not like impressive preseason. I think he's been consistent in camp. I think Jamie Sheriff has been really impressive, but he's done it against inferior competition. So I do need to see, like, tonight would be an important night for him if they can get him some snaps. I don't know if they will. They might hide him if they're planning on getting him to practice squad. I don't know. But for me personally, I would love to see him go against some higher level competition. I've seen him in 1v1s in practice, Jeff, and he's beating good players, and he just looks he looks good. So I'm hoping that at least he and Nelson Caesar are opportunities on the practice squad. So I'm not worried about, I will just go out there on a limb, I guess. It doesn't feel like I'm that far out. I'm not worried about this edge group. Do I think that this group has a elite A-list rusher? No. Do I think that they can be in the top third of the league among edge groups collectively? I do. I actually do. And we'll see that. We'll see this play out in a few weeks.
It's probably not the best content, but like we have the exact same opinion there. And I actually tweeted it because I think Mina was on with someone doing our NFC West preview. And Mina, for a while, Mina's one of the smartest Seahawks people there is, but she's been hammering that the edge group is a big hole. And I remember during her draft pre-shows, she did this podcast where she would always bring up 2 players the Seahawks may be looking at and have her guest pick which one. And she would do that for each team. And she was always like Latu, and he's looked pretty good. But I was always screaming at my phone. I'm like, no, they need to get inside guys. Like, she wouldn't have Byron Murphy because she's like, the edge is so bad. And so she was doing a preview a few weeks ago, and she really is optimistic. And she's like, the edge group is potential for like, ugh. And I'm like, I think I tweeted her. I said, I think Mina's being too hard on the edge group. And I look, and they don't have an elite player. There's no way you can say this edge group is going to be elite. I think if you're objectively saying that, you're probably being way too optimistic. But you look, and Chenowusu's a solid to good NFL player. Boye Mafe is a guy had 9 sacks last year. Had 7 games with sacks in a row. And Derek Hall is a second-year player who looks like a guy who's take a considerable step forward. And that's not even including Trey Jones. That's a pretty solid edge group, and this is a scheme that's helped elevate players who are pretty mediocre. And so I'd say I think the edge group is solid, and I think it could be good. And so I'm not there. I literally tweeted that, so I'm not going to argue that because you can find my receipt. If this group sucks, you can use it against me. But
yeah, last thing I'll just say on this topic, as we've beaten it to death, is I think people also forget that the way Mike McDonald is coaching his defensive line, there's a number of guys playing all up and down the line. He's had already Byron Murphy play at edge. He has had Leonard Williams play at edge. I think you'll see even Jaron Reed potentially at times, but definitely Mike Morris will play at edge. So I just think that there's more options there than people realize, and I think that maybe there's just, it's one of those things where either I'm gonna find out that I was completely off and I was wearing maybe rose-colored glasses, or I will get to look back and be like, all right, I can trust my eyes. I was okay. So we won't know for a few weeks, but we'll see about that. I do want to make you uncomfortable. I'm going to do that in a second. But before I do, I want to remind folks that this episode is brought to you by ftnfantasy.com. And if you go to ftnfantasy.com and use promo code HAWKS, you get 15% off. And that's like less than $8 a month to get all the DVOA data that you want, as well as helping with your fantasy football drafts, with picking your fantasy football lineups. There's even stuff to help with sports betting if you're into that kind of thing. So I would highly recommend it. They're great guys over there, and they're building something, I think, pretty special. So ftnfantasy.com, promo code HAWKS for under $8 a month. All right, Jeff. Now, like I said, I want to make you uncomfortable. And there's a few ways that I know how to do that. We're gonna start by playing a little bit of sound here. This is Bootleg Football talking the other day about the best rookies of preseason.
I did mention Byron Murphy II earlier. So again, the meat of this episode is EJ and I each have 3 rookies that we really want to call out, that had a very good start to their preseason, that have put some really good tape out there so far. And my first one is Byron Murphy II, who we are biased because we had monster grades on him throughout the pre-draft process. A lot of people had him as DT1 in the class. It was either him or Newton. I would say if you're factoring in health, like obviously he would be DT1 because of Newton's foot stuff, but at worst, he was DT2 for everybody, right? So we all knew he was good. Like, we're not shocked by this. No. But still, seeing what he did to other grown men that were fighting for NFL roster spots, right? This was not some like 290-pound SMU center. Like, he's doing this against a guy who is competing for an NFL job. And to still see him ragdoll other grown men like that, not just once, not just twice, but virtually every single play. He was resetting the line of scrimmage. He was exceptionally quick and fluid as a penetrator. He kind of showed off a lot of what Mike McDonald was comparing him to for Justin Madubuike in terms of how he runs stunts in games and can just blow by the hip of an offensive lineman before they even have a shot of picking him up on stunts. Everything he did screamed Justin Madubuike, and that's why they took him. But the thing is, he's already looking like Justin Madubuike in his first ever actual NFL action. He looked exactly like he did in college, and that's saying a lot because he destroyed everybody in college too. Now he's destroying NFL players. I know Rome was the right pick at 9, but I understand now the Bears fans that were like, fuck it, Byron Murphy, no matter what, at 9. Like, we need this guy. He's the next great 3 technique. Like, yeah, I agree. He looks like the next great 3 technique. He looks like one of these, future multiple Pro Bowl, potentially all pro type guys. I can't speak highly enough about how good that debut was.
Had you heard that yet, Jeff?
I had not. I was a little cringy. I'm not used to praise.
We're not done yet. I'm going to make you more uncomfortable. Folks, if you don't know this about Jeff, he really struggles when people say good things about the Seahawks. He prefers it when everyone's negative about them.
Yeah, I like to fly under the radar.
Yeah. What did you think about that?
It's telling, man. I've been watching with my eyes, but the people who like really know like the technical aspects of football, like Brett is really, really good. Daniel Jeremiah, Chris Sims, like the people who really know, they've been speaking about Byron Murphy at a totally different level than even my eyes have seen. And Brett has been like, and again, you watch this guy closely in college. I saw him here and there. Just hearing that was really eye-opening. Just hearing how physically dominant he is. And I don't know, like, the inner workings of hand usage and moving guys off the line. I can see who's flashing and who isn't. And all the people that I really trust and all the people that I like, they speak about him at a totally different level than even I've seen. So it gets me obviously very excited because we love the pick. I still think it's shocking that he fell to 16. And in hindsight, have you heard a word about Johnny Newton? I know he's been missed.
He was injured. That's all I heard. I'll take a look to see if he's played.
Yeah, that has totally gone up because I've heard flashes of that from other players, Mikey Sainstrill and guys from other than that camp, but I haven't heard a word about Johnny Newton. And there was a lot of people that had Newton over Murphy, and I wonder if that, and me and you were on the other side of that. So that might be a one that we look back on, kind of giggle at down the road. But man, I thought this guy might take a bit of time. They have all these D tackles, but he's looked really impressive. And yeah, I obviously don't want to get too hyped. I don't want to get too much excitement because I remember like Frank Clark's first year where he came in and like dominated the preseason. When the season starts and he was just like a fish out of water. But I think Murphy's in the right system with the right players around him. Yeah, I don't know if we'll see him against the first string Cleveland offensive line on the interior tonight. That would be really cool. If he goes out and pushes those guys around, that's the best offensive line maybe in the AFC. then I'm not going to be able to control myself.
Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit because I don't know exactly what part of the Browns line is going to play. I know Jermaine Ifedi is going to be playing left tackle, it sounds like. And it sounds like maybe Joel Bitonio may not play. They've typically not played him in the preseason. But in any event, yes, it would be interesting to see him go against some legitimate starting caliber offensive linemen and what he can do. What I loved from that admittedly long clip, they go on, by the way, but I just couldn't play the whole thing, is the next great 3-tech. And if that's not music to your ears as a Seahawks fan, I don't know what is. I think the question is he getting over? Is he overhyped? Are our expectations getting out of whack with what's realistic? I don't know, Jeff. For me, it is a situation where the combination of what I've already seen his traits to be, how he's shown up already, the type of worker he is, how coachable he is, how much his teammates already respect him and talk about how hard of a worker he is. I don't think it's wrong to get, excited about what that looks like. Maybe he doesn't become all of that as a rookie, but the arrow is pointing pretty high up.
Yeah, and the kind of way they're talking about him, it's obviously a completely different position. And this is going back like 14, 15. I remember the first time I saw Earl Thomas play in the preseason. And I think he like picked off Brett Favre or just like his speed. He looked like a player that looked different than everyone else. Mm-hmm. And to be fair, Earl's first year was really up and down. It's a really complicated position, and they almost benched him. But the way he's being talked about, and they were drafted right around the same spot, funny enough, out of Texas, it kind of reminds me of that, where you could just see traits that just look different than everyone else. And sometimes we can be wrong. I know Josh kind of jokes always about Rasheem Green and what he's done, but that was different. That was Rasheem Green beating up on like backup level players, and he was always kind of a toolsy guy. But Byron Murphy's strength and speed. So just going back to Earl, you could tell this guy just looked like a dude, and that's what I've seen from Murphy. And like when all these guys who know as much about football as anyone are watching and seeing the same thing we are, it's super telling. And that's where, the next grade 3 technique. And frankly, we've watched the drafting in Seattle over the years. We haven't seen a lot of guys that have looked like this.
Mm-mm.
Even DK, I think his first game is where he really, his rookie game is like, wow, this kid can play. But like, we haven't had first round picks in a lot of years. Devin Witherspoon sat out a lot last year. Smith and Jigba broke his hand. Charles Cross was a left tackle. We just haven't seen guys that look like this guy is a dude. Earl was the one like really that jumped off the page to me. And really, I haven't seen a guy like that in Seattle really since that. And Murphy's obviously totally different position. I see the same traits.
I think that's a good call for sure. There's a couple super chats we should get to. Old Fish Guy, thank you for the super chat, says, looking forward to this season. However, I worry about all the one-year contracts and how it will affect 2025. Old Fish, that is tomorrow's problem. Enjoy what we got going on this year. If you've got a team that earns additional contracts, they will get them. And, We'll see. I get it, but this is a transitional year for this roster, and the benefit of those 1-year contracts is if some of these young guys do pop, if Tyrese Knight is a guy that you want to be a starter next year, there's nobody blocking that from happening if you don't want there to be. But you also have the potential with 2, I think, pretty good starting linebackers that if they excel and you want to keep them, you probably will have a better chance of doing it if you want. So I'm not too worried about that, but I understand why someone might be. This next one, Board Skyler says, I believe Murph makes the edge room a lot more interesting, soaking up those extra bodies. I'm a firm believer that Bobo takes Lockett's wide receiver 3 spot. What do you think about that, Jeff?
I definitely agree on Murphy. I think the impact why defensive tackles are interesting is, and it really might benefit linebacker more than even edge. But he's a guy who's going to get a lot of double teams, and anytime you have a player that draws double teams, it opens up the rest. The Bobo for Lockett thing is interesting because Bobo has like a lot of the requisite skills to be in 3 receiver sets. But the one thing is just Lockett's like deep speed when he was going, and they'll really be lacking speed if they have Lockett. I mean, Bobo and JSN, but there's not a lot of deep speed there. So I'm a little skeptical. I see Bobo as like the perfect wide receiver 4. I think they might need a draft for that spot. But listen, Bobo keeps proving a lot of people wrong. Speed has not been a limitation for him. And if he can really take a step forward, because his route running is excellent, he has the best hands, I think, on the wide receiver group. I don't think it's a crazy thought, but I still see a bit of a limitation there. I don't know if he can hit that.
Yeah, I think I've talked about Bobo taking some of Lockett's snaps because Bobo provides run blocking that Tyler simply won't be able to.
Yeah.
And I think Bobo also provides a target size, a high point target size that is appealing to the quarterbacks to be able to know it's there, even if they're covered, if he's covered. So I do think Bobo is going to be a healthy part of this offense, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I think Lockett is it's kind of in the perfect spot, Jeff, because I think all the expectations are as low as they've ever been for Tyler Lockett, and people are going to see him out there and be like, oh, wait, I forgot Tyler Lockett gets open all the time. And maybe he's not getting the deep ball all the time that he used to, but he is still a very useful receiver to have on your team. So I think he'll have a nice season. Got a super chat from Detail Oriented. Where would we be without Detail Oriented? Says, Brian, I just noticed that we're at 11,500 subscribers to the channel, 500 to go to get to 12,000 subscribers by week 1. Go Hawks. Yeah, that would be awesome. We went from 10,000 subscribers, Jeff, to 11,000 subscribers in 3 months.
Wow.
If we get to 12,000 subscribers by week 1, we will have gone from 11 to 12 in 1 month. So love the trajectory. If you haven't subscribed, please take a second to do so. If you're listening on Twitter or Instagram, head over to YouTube, subscribe. You will not regret it. You want to click the bell to get notified because, for example, tonight I'll be at the game. I will be going to the post-game press conference. I might go in the locker room afterwards. I might have a post-game show after that. So I don't know when the timing of these things will be. The only way for you to know is to click that bell to get notified and click subscribe to the channel. So that's another reminder. Wow, a couple more super chats, then we will get on to the next thing to make Jeff uncomfortable here. This comes from Smokehawk. Jeff is nervous about praise because he remembers the Boz and every other prospect we've had. Is that fair, Jeff?
I'm probably too young for the Boz, but yeah, more along the lines. I've seen a lot of, even in Toronto, I've seen a lot of hyped teams. And I guess the 2013 Seahawks probably should have shut me up because that was the most hyped team I've ever been around, and they won the Super Bowl. So I'm just a cautiously optimistic guy. I've been saying all year, like, it's going to take time. They're going to start slow. It's just how my brain's wired and how I handle expectations better. I don't like being disappointed. So, yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say, but I'd rather us just kind of flying under the radar, catches everyone off guard, sort of like the first rendition of this Pete Carroll Seahawks. And listen, if there's getting hype or getting steam, I mean, something's going right. So I can live with that.
Yeah. We have got the amazing Rick R has gifted 5 memberships to the channel. I love this from you, Rick. Thank you so much for being generous. And hopefully folks that get gifted these memberships, consider paying it forward. Gifting memberships to other people, bringing more people to the show, bringing out the community together. It's just a great thing, and I love it when it happens, and I know people really appreciate it when it happens to them. Looks like Daysum is one of those people already thanking Rick. That is a connection. That's what we're here for. Let's connect as many people as possible who are Seahawks fans and good, solid folks. All right. Next thing, I got 2 more things to make you uncomfortable, Jeff. I could have had more, but I had to contain it because I didn't want you to leave feeling freaked out. So the next one, I could have played the audio, but honestly, the audio wasn't interesting. I will read to you. This comes from Nate Tice, and he's talking about breakout candidates for 2024. I will tell you that JSN came up. They talked about him a little bit. Wasn't interesting enough to play. But here's the one that I thought you'd want to hear. Charles Cross has the highest pedigree of the trio I'm naming on the offensive line. He had one of the worst 2023 seasons, but he looked like a Pro Bowler at times as a rookie, showing off his length and light feet and pass protection and more run blocking ballyhoo than you'd expect from an air raid offensive tackle. But his 2023 season was marred by injuries, and it was apparent that even when he was on the field, he was nowhere close to 100%. I expect a bounce back from Cross on a Seahawks offense that will surprise a lot of people under new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb, who brought former Washington Huskies offensive line coach Scott Huff, whose unit won the Joe Moore Award as the nation's best in 2023. Grubb and Huff have shown they understand how to keep their line from difficult tasks and streamline a lot of things for their players. I'm betting Cross rebounds simply by being healthier and excels in a friendlier offensive environment. This guy could and should be a Pro Bowler in 2024.
Man, there's a lot of buzz for Cross right now.
Really? You've heard it other places.
Albert Breer, when he was in Seattle, said this guy's going to jump to a Pro Bowl level player. Brady Henderson every day talks about the one-on-ones, and he said Charles Cross, and Nate Tice another guy. Like, the way he studies football is a lot different than like how a lot of the hot takey guys study football. Nate Tice played quarterback at Wisconsin. His dad was an NFL coach. He knows how to watch film, and he sees things that I or a lot of people could just never see. So he's someone when he says something, I really listen to it. And it's just like everyone who's been around the Seahawks keep talking about how different he looks and how much more focused he looks. And he's been pretty underwhelming so far. Yeah, I think we probably overestimated the impact that injury did have on him when he came back. He was probably not the same player physically. But I don't know. Everyone just keeps talking about it. There's like a different look in his eyes. And I've never really heard about him dominating drills before. And so when Albert Breer talks to coaches and probably talked to John Schneider and Nate Tice, who's watching the film of these guys and knows these players and knows these coaches, this is a guy I'm a little scared to get excited about because I don't want to get excited about him and then he's the same as he was before and he's just the guy. And so, but it's just everyone who's been sort of around the team this year says this guy looks like a dude. And he was a top 10 pick. Some people talked about him looking a little smaller. I don't know. We haven't seen him play in the preseason. But if he takes a step forward, I think this is as meaningful as anything around the Seahawks this year. This is one thing I'm really looking for. Is Charles Cross a guy? And if he becomes a guy and all the other positive young players, this 3 draft stretch has just potential to transform this organization. And so, yeah, it is a situation I'm cautious about because I just haven't seen it myself. I need to see it. But look, when there's smoke, there's fire. Like, there is a lot of people talking about this guy. You don't hear that kind of talk about any other offensive lineman they have.
Yeah, here's where I am with Cross, dude. So I'm okay with it because my expectations are not super high.
Okay.
I not that I think he's going to be bad, but I'm seeing what I think I need to see to believe that he can be a left tackle you are happy to have as a starter on your team.
Yeah.
And what I've seen to date, like prior to, is a guy that just wasn't good enough. Like, he was too inconsistent. There was games that he was a problem. There were plays where he was not great, and like significant number of plays. And you can't have a left tackle that is someone that you're going to have to help on a regular basis to block who he's going against. And so what I've seen so far makes me believe that he's going to be a good one, that he's going to take a step forward. I think physically, I have some questions, just like he never looks that big, but he is cat quick. And I think his strength belies his size. So I'll just say, I don't know about Pro Bowl. I don't think that's crazy, but I think that I'm with you. I've got to see it in real games, and I've got to see it sustained to feel okay about it, but I think there's a decent chance that it can be. So that was the Charles Cross piece. This next one is something you have heard. In fact, you pointed out to me. I'm going to play a little bit of this for you, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. This is Bill Simmons with Sheil Kapadia.
Or like, there's just talent there. And so I think this is a defense that September, people might be laughing at me. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you had him as a top 5 defense. But by the time we get to like mid-October, November, I'm telling you, I think this defense is going to be playing really, really well. And it's a reason why I've got the Seahawks overs on everything. I mean, one of my favorite overs in the entire league, 7.5, I think is still the number, which I can't believe. I think they're making the playoffs. I think they're going to win 10 games. I think Mike McDonald's going to be coach of the year. I think it's going to be one of the stories of the season.
It's so funny because we have not talked about this. I have the most futures on Seattle of any team.
Mm-hmm.
The 7.5 was like an absolute outrage. I did the alt on FanDuel, which was like plus 148. That was like 8.5. I'm like, great. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I have them for the playoffs. I have a sprinkle of NFC West action. There's exact order bets you can do on FanDuel. So if you think Seattle's going to win the division, San Francisco is going to be second, Arizona third, Rams fourth, 25-1. Fun flyer. But I think the Murphy piece, just being able to get somebody that was clearly a top 10 guy, but everyone just went offense crazy this year, and you land that guy, you really needed somebody in the middle. I agree with you on. I love Pete Carroll, but I thought that he kind of lost his fastball the last couple of years. It happens. He's in his mid 70s, and the energy of McDonald. You combine it with the home field, which against the right type of team. But then look at their first 3. They're home for Denver. Bo Nix's first start. They're at the Pats. I think the Pats are going to be the worst team in the league. Home Miami. They could be 3-0 heading into at Detroit on Monday. And then after that, I mean, they just have some crap teams on the schedule, right? They play the Giants. They got a Chicago game later. They get to play Arizona twice. We'll see if Arizona's going to be good. They got Minnesota at home. I think they can get to 10 wins.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on the defense. I think they have enough dudes on that defense that combined with their receivers, which would you put their receivers like that? It's like a top 7 receiving crew. Right?
Yeah, I would say so for sure. I mean, it all comes down to their offensive line, which it feels like we've been saying about the Seahawks for like a decade. But what I like is they can win in different ways. They could win. Their offense could be pretty good. Their defense could be pretty good. Like, I like to go through and say what teams could have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense is like an exercise.
Very possible.
I think it's possible with them. And the other thing, I think McDonald's game management is going to be awesome. Like in terms of saving timeouts, when to go for it on 4th down, when to go for 2, all those things that kind of the new school coaches are doing. I think he's going to be very good at that too. I think that's another area where he'll probably give him an edge over Carroll.
A lot of Kenneth Walker buzz too.
Yeah.
He's definitely going to go 2 rounds or $15 more than I think people are going to be prepared for in their fantasy league.
What did you think about that, Jeff? There's a lot more than that.
Yeah. So I was definitely a little caught off guard when I saw it on Hawk Blogger Mornings this week when Sheil had the Seahawks as a top 5 defense this year. And we've all been cautiously optimistic. And so, okay, I got the sense he's pretty bullish. Then I heard him talk, and I was like, okay, this guy's all in. I get it. It makes sense. The logic's there. When Bill Simmons got all in, I heard that he's made all his future bets on the Seahawks. That's where I got nervous. I'm a regular Bill Simmons listener, and he's pretty good. He's very entertaining, but like so he kind of like goes with what like the hot media teams are, and he usually gets like a lot of it wrong. And he's a very entertaining guy, but once he was all in, I was like, oh no, this might be a bad opening. Because what happened in the NFL is like once the whole media kind of zigs, usually what happens is the opposite. But I guess the other end of that is Detroit last year. Like everybody loved Detroit, and they hit the ground, and they should have made the Super Bowl. So that was the part that like brought like the nervous energy out of me. It's like, oh god, Bill Simmons is betting on the Seahawks, and now he's saying they might beat San Francisco. But like, man, Shields one of my favorite beat writers that's covered this team since I've been following. And he's not someone that's like overly emotional, gets like takey. He is just like a reasonable, smart, logical guy. And what him and Brady remind me a lot of each other. Like you don't hear Brady coming out with like over the top takes. And Shields studies this stuff, and like it's hard to disagree with what he's talking about. I don't think they're going to be a top 5 defense this year. I think by the end of the year they're going to have the look of that. But what prompted that answer was they went through and named the 5 teams that intrigue him the most on defense. And Seattle was number 1 for Shield. They had him number 1. And they were just – it's hard to disagree with what he's saying, like the McDonald piece where the game management – although I was curious about the kicking versus going for a 4th and 1 last week. That was a very curious decision. But I think they're right about Pete. I think – and what he talks about is that earlier in the segment, it was just like really since the Legion of Boom left, Pete's tried to adjust. He's tried to hire different coaches. They've done different schemes, and he can never quite figure out this defense. And now they got the guy that he said he can't find a guy in the league that doesn't have great things to say about McDonald. So it lines up with a lot of what we talked about, why we're excited about McDonald, why we think he's the right leader for the team, why we think he's going to be that defensive guy, and why this whole thing is sustainable. And then everyone forgets they were like the 12th ranked efficient offense last year for DVOA, and that was the year where their offensive line was disaster, and people argue that Geno took a step back. They didn't have a running game. So there's just a ton of pieces there. So, yeah, I get where they think if this defense is good, this should be a pretty good team. And, like, I went into this year thinking, like, okay, Seattle, Denver, whatever. It's a game I can just sit back and enjoy. And now every time I hear these guys talk, I'm like, oh, boy, I'm going to be stressed out that they can't lose the game now. And I want to try to enjoy the game. But it's hard to disagree with anything he said. But, yeah, it definitely brought up all the bad sides inside of my head.
I have a lot of thoughts I was sharing in a second. You mentioned the Seahawks being 12th in DVOA, which is a good reminder, folks. You can get access to all the DVOA data you can imagine, not only by team, but by player. You can get matchups of teams by versus number 1 receivers, number 2 receivers versus tight ends versus running backs. You can get defensive line stats, offensive line stats. There's a ton of stuff in there. At ftnfantasy.com, promo code Hawks gets you access to all of it. Do it. You will not regret it. I'm a subscriber and continue to. Before I was a partner, I was a subscriber, and I will continue to be. So you can get 15% off, less than $8 a month. It's a must do. All right, quick throat clear. So there are a few things that they said that kind of piqued my interest. One, Shield kind of, I don't think I played this part, Jeff, but he defended, like he started by saying, like, last year I picked 2 defenses to jump up. I picked, which was the first that he picked?
Cleveland. It was
Cleveland and then Carolina. He's like, I was right about Cleveland. I was wrong about Carolina. He wasn't wrong about Carolina. Carolina jumped 16 spots with under Ejiro. So, like, he was right. And I thought that was just notable. So 1, 2, to your point, everything they said was a little bit validating, even if it wasn't like, you know, hey, let's not get out of our skis. It is nice to hear someone outside of Seattle that has no reason to be biased in this way. In fact, that sometimes people are biased the other way. To say 7.5 as an over-under for wins is a joke for this team. And now you always say those things, and that's why I personally don't do sports betting. I know a lot of people, most of my friends do. They love it. I know you do. Whatever. Like, I have no problem with it. But every time I think there's a no-brainer, then it ends up not being a no-brainer. And I'm like, why did I do that? So maybe that'll turn out. But if for them to be under on 7.5, the only way I see that happening is like massive bad injury luck.
Mm-hmm.
The quality of the team as it stands is not a 7-win team or a 6-win team. It's just not. And I don't know how you could even make the case that it's that. Is there something, if you were to make the case that they are a 6 or 7-win team, I'm going to put you on the spot. How would you make that case?
I would guess Charles Cross would be injured. I think it's massively injured. I think if Charles Cross or Geno gets injured, there is potential for that, because Howell with a bad offensive line it's going to be hard to watch. I think defensively, it's hard to, like, they have so much depth in the defensive line. One injury won't sink them. The linebacker play, like, even if it's as bad as possible, the Seahawks won 9 games last year with some of the worst linebacker coverage play you can imagine. Bobby was awful. So even if they're significantly worse, I still think they can function enough in other areas. So I think injury would be the case. And I think the second one would just be if Grubb is just over his head and just the NFL thing isn't working for him and the offense just can't function. That would be really the only case, because there's so many pieces, and like there's certain spots where even one injury, there's even like if Devin Witherspoon got injured, they have enough corners to come out and play tomorrow. They can function there quite easily. Trey Brown and Tariq Woolen can play a game. So it's really just Cross is where, like, if Stone Forsythe has to play significant snaps, and then the rest of the O-line just don't hit. That's really the only spot. Like, I think I've seen enough at McDonald. I can't just see him busting once the season starts. Grubb, I don't know. Like, I think if Grubb comes out and just is shit, and we saw it with, like, Pete Carroll, best coach in Seahawks history, year one of him, Jeremy Bates, they fired him after a year because they didn't think he was any good. So it's not like them. If Grubb doesn't work out, the whole thing's a disaster. But really, I think it's injury luck at certain spots. And obviously, if Sam Howell have to play and the offensive line sucks, I think that could be a path to get them a high draft pick next year. But other than that, it's really hard to see. They can, like they said, their team is really complete. They're deep, and they're not just relying on one thing.
Another thing they said, Jeff, was that the Seahawks, I don't think I had played this part, but they said this team has a chance to be a top 10 DVOA team on offense and defense.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of teams that fit that. So I'm looking back last year at the teams that were top 10 in DVOA in both offense and defense. 49ers were first in offense, fourth in defense. The Baltimore Ravens were fourth in offense, first in defense. The Kansas City Chiefs were 8th on offense, 7th on defense. The Dallas Cowboys were 9th on offense, 5th on defense. That's it. That's it. So San Francisco, Baltimore, Kansas City, and Dallas. If the Seahawks manage somehow to be top 10 in both of those things, then I don't think even, like, they both said, hey, this is a 10-win team. If they're top 10 in both of those things, they're not a 10-win team. They are 11 or 12-win team.
Yeah.
And that's, I think my ceiling for this team right now is 13 wins. Like, that's if everything's like cooking.
Yeah.
But I don't think 12 is becoming on the probability curve. I don't think that's crazy. I'm not going to predict 12 wins for them. I'll tell you that right now. But if somebody did, I wouldn't look at that and think that person's completely off their rocker.
No, it really comes down to I expect the defense to take its time and have an adjustment period. If they just hit the ground running, and they don't need their offense to be great, they just need their offense to be competent. And then if the offense is great, then I think that's a path to 12 wins. I think really it comes down to two things. Does the defense need a month or two to adjust? And even Shield said he thinks the first month it's possible that people are laughing at him. And the second one's just the offensive line. If Connor Williams is good and Charles Cross takes the step, that ceiling is possible. They need the offensive line to not be a disaster. And We don't know who's going to win a right guard. We don't know. We haven't seen much of Laken Tomlinson. We don't know when Abe Lucas is coming back. So the range of outcomes on this offensive line is massive. It could be anywhere from one of the worst in the league. Some groups have them ranked 32nd. It could be totally fine. But for them to be 12 wins, that is such a big deal because they need to be able to function against some really good defensive lines. And that's really what, again, we've been saying this for months. The thing that impacts the ceiling is this group up front.
Yeah, the other thing that affects the win total is who they're going to play and how those teams are going to be.
Yes.
That first game of the season, we're going to get into it, not today, but must win against the Broncos.
Yeah.
And I think it's a game that by all numbers, they're highly favored to win. But Sean Payton, Bo Nix, and that crew, you never know. Like, we've seen crazier things. That second game in New England, must win. And so on one hand, it's like, hey, both of these games, they should win. And they probably will win. But you're not guaranteed those games. If you drop one of those games, it's a problem.
Oh, yeah.
If you win both of them, it was interesting that, it was Bill Simmons saying, and then they got Miami at home. They could be 3-0. I mean, Miami is a very good team.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody should just be assuming they can be 3-0.
Yeah, that was the one where it was just like, you're overlooking that like ready-made offense.
Yeah. That will be the way it sets up right now. That will be the game where either the Seahawks open eyes or everyone's like, yeah, they're just, they're in their first season. They're developing. We'll see. If they win their first two games going away, I don't think anyone's going to be like, watch out for those Seahawks.
No.
But that third game will set things up. And if they beat Miami, Jeff, and then they go into play Detroit, was it Monday night?
Yeah, it is.
It's on, man. It's a totally different year. Like, who knows what that game, like they beat the Lions in Detroit 2 years in a row. As much respect as I have for the Lions, as good as I think that team is, I'm not going to that game thinking they've got no shot to win it. So, yeah, I want the season to get here already.
I know. And it's funny. The two teams that like all like the bettors or the people who, the two teams that everyone's like they're way undervalued are Seattle and Denver. Denver's is 5.5, and just the buzz on Bo Nix is just rising. And he was a pick that obviously we weren't that high on for the Seahawks side, and we thought he was a total reach. So it's going to be really interesting because Bo Nix has played against backups in the preseason. Like the hype on him has gone crazy. He played Green Bay's backups, and he was the second stringer in week 1.
Well, he's played better against backups than Brock Purdy's played against backups.
He has. Brock Purdy has not looked very good. It's funny when you take the Avengers away, all of a sudden he looks like a guy.
Yeah.
And we saw that last year. But yeah, Bo Nix, not the easiest first start going into Seattle against Mike McDonald's defense. Most complex scheme you can go into. If he comes out and he looks like Drew Brees, then it might be a pretty big. But yeah, there's a lot of buzz on Denver, and some of their beat writers are starting to act like David Lombardi. So it's getting a little crazy around there. So that's going to be a really fascinating week 1. But you're right. Nationally, if Seattle beats Denver, who's 5.5 over under, and New England, who's even Bill Simmons, who picks them to make the playoffs last year, said they're going to be the worst team in the league, which it probably will be. That Miami game, and Bill kind of just overlooked them like they're nothing. But if you remember McDonald's first year in Baltimore, the game that kind of exposed his start was Miami torched them. That was McDaniel's first year.
In the second half, yeah.
Yeah, they just torched them. And Tua was just like hawking it down the field. And they had a lot of communication errors. And then Baltimore was able to tighten it up and then eventually get Roquan Smith. And then they crushed them last year. So I think that is the game where we're going to learn, is this like an adjustment period or are they ready to go now? And you're right. If they're 3-0 going into Monday Night Football, the hype is going to get pretty big.
It'd be fun, dude. It'd be
that
fun.
That would be the ideal.
The vibes would be amazing. We'll let you go here in a second, but a couple more. I want to talk about the game tonight and before we go. Before we do that. Okay, good. So Rylan, 10 Hawk Blogger memberships, just gave them away, man. Appreciate you big time. I know other folks do as well. Dr. Sedated is thanking you. Other folks are thanking you. I am thanking you. Really, really appreciate it. If you've got a gifted membership from Rylan, really think about paying it forward and gifting memberships to other people to kind of grow the community and keep this a fun and happy place to talk about the Seahawks. I do want to talk really quickly. There was some conversation in chat that was kind of going sideways. And I want to just say this, like, we're going to keep things to football, but I also don't want anybody calling at anyone else names. So you can have some feelings about other people and their comments. Talk about the football stuff. Talk about the comment itself. We're not going to tolerate people calling each other names, and then we're not going to turn it into a political conversation. So let's keep it to football, folks. That's what we're all here for. And I want to make sure everybody feels safe and comfortable to be in chat. So let's not call each other names either. Appreciate that. And I appreciate Smoke and Detail and everyone else, old school Seahawk, that have been helping moderate chat. Appreciate that a lot. And Jeff, Hawks fan Matt, man, is a member for 4 months. Congratulations on your anniversary, dude. He has probably watched as much or more of Hawk Blogger Mornings as anybody. He says, how close do you think the defense is to fully grasping McDonald's scheme? Do you have a guess on this? It's a little hard to say at this point.
I was going to say it's a really hard question to answer because they've been very protective in what they're showing. And even in like the mic'd up segments, McDonald was telling players before last week's game in Tennessee, like they're not going to show anything. So they've been very vanilla. I know like some of the film guys were like they can't do basic things on defense. I think a lot of it is by design. I think for a coach like McDonald, and McVay does this the same way, they don't want to show anything. The element of surprise is one of their best things. So it's an impossible question for me to answer. What makes his scheme is when basically everyone's interconnected. So it took them about half a year to learn it, and really they didn't hit until year 2 because they finally got some pieces that flung the thing over the top. So what makes the scheme work is when the whole front is interconnected and one guy goes and the other guy drops, and then the next snap you don't know who's coming and who's going and how to make up the coverage difference. And that's why they like Julian Love, because he's such a good communicator and he can help. I wish I had a good answer, but honestly, that's what makes this team so intriguing. We don't know anything about what they're going to run defensively. And when we saw them in Baltimore, I think it was the first time we were just, they hit you like a punch in the face. And Seahawks were like a pretty good offensive team at that point. So I don't have a great answer on that. I really wish I did, but I think that's one of the more intriguing parts of this transition from preseason to regular season.
Yeah, the best thing I can say there is Mike McDonald's own assessment, which has been not there yet, not up to the standard. And then recently I asked him about, like, hey, you've been a part of a defensive turnaround at Michigan and at Baltimore. What does it take for that to happen? And he started talking about alignment, but the main thing he said that stuck with me is like, we're on that track. And I will continue to just like, we had the Pete translator that we got over the years. For Mike McDonald, when he says anything that's above neutral, amplify that by 100. And so like when he, with faint praise, is saying we're on that track, that's something I think people should feel encouraged by. I'm not saying it's there, but that's a good thing. And the other good thing, Jeff, is he's never gonna shy away from the standard that he wants to see. So if they're not there, the chances that they're going to stay below the standard, I think, are much lower than what we've seen in past years, where it just feels hopeless. Like they're throwing bodies, they're throwing crap against the wall. And I don't think that's going to be Mike McDonald. I think he is a mechanic who will finally tune this thing, and he'll get rid of the parts that don't fit.
Yeah.
We got a comment here, or a new member, Kevin Camacho. Love the name, man. Kevin Camacho, welcome to the crew. So glad to have you as a member. Thank you for joining. We've got a super chat from Miller Muse. Why are these preseason games so late in the day? I don't know, man. I mean, I'm happy I'm on the West Coast for it. I'll tell you that much, but it's wild to me that it's this late. So I do not know why they did that. All right, let's talk about the game quickly tonight. Any players that you've got that you're hoping show out tonight for purposes of making the roster? Like, do you have, I don't know if you've gone through and you've got any like wish lists for the roster. Like, obviously the starters, we hope they play well and they stay healthy, but I'm more interested in, are there any players lower down the list that you're kind of hoping show out tonight?
Yeah, Laviska Shenault has been like my favorite player to watch maybe in the first 2 preseason games. He looks like he's on some, and like Mario, when you hit the start and like you start running at full speed and the sound comes on. That's what Shenault kind of feels like. When he gets the ball, he like it just. So I want to see more of this guy. I'm like, I've liked him a lot, and he's a fun player. So he's a guy for me. Like the big one is Christian Haynes. I want to see him take that job. And in San Francisco, unfortunately, a guy we really liked in the pre-draft process, Dominic Pooney, has done that. He's going to probably win the right guard spot, and Cyrus Hayden, because we really liked him. And I know Baldy put out a video on him this morning. And Haynes has looked really solid to me. I think he looked solid. I would like to see him take that spot. Around the roster, not a ton of guy. Mike Jarrell is a guy like I liked what I've seen from him so far. I hope he really earns a spot. I hope he doesn't get like caught through waivers. But for the most part, like I guess some of the young edge rushers will be a point of fun, especially after that trade yesterday. But no, it's like most of the roster is kind of shaping up. I don't think there's a ton of position battles. Maybe like the last couple of linemen, whether they keep 3 or 4 running backs. I think 4 tight ends are going to make it now with 2 tight end injuries. I think AJ Barner, luckily, has not maybe earned his job, but he's going to make the team now. So there's not a ton out there. So it's really just those guys I've mentioned.
I think you're right. I think you hit on some of them. I'll tell you something I don't want to see. And this is maybe like, I don't want to be negative about it, but Eskridge will play tonight. And the team clearly has investment in him, but they've moved on from other second round picks like Daryl Taylor. So it's not like they're just going to do it for whatever. If he has a big game or a big return and it means that they cut a guy like Derek Young, I'll be frustrated about that. I think Derek Young brings a lot more to the table. Special teams, full part of his position than D. Eskridge does. It also could mean that D. Williams doesn't make the team. I think as of now, I have D. Williams making the team as a returner. I think he has some potential to really be a special returner. And I like him. Like he's a solid dude. Like, so that's one. I think the running back 3 battle is going to be interesting, Jeff, and whether we're going to see Helani get some more. He only got 3 carries last week. And so everyone's like, oh, Kenny McIntosh. Well, it's a little hard to say that there was a battle because only Kenny McIntosh got carries between the 2 of them. So we'll see about that. I am curious about the linebacker spot, Jeff. So they just traded for Michael Barrett. I'm hoping I think he will play. Hope he will be number 43, by the way, for people that are following along. I initially... Excuse me, I'm getting choked up about all this. One sec. Excuse me. Initially on my show yesterday, I had John Radigan making the roster. And then I thought about it and I was like, well, I mean, Patty O'Connell and John Radigan were like one or the other. And I was like, well, John Radigan, you save like $3 million in cap if you cut him. So why, if they're that close, why wouldn't you take Patty O? So I have Patty O making the final roster, but that's going to be interesting, seeing how Michael Barrett looks, assuming he gets snaps. Back end of the defensive tackle room, I think Mike Morris is a lock or should be, but I got to ask you, do you feel that way, or am I just like telling myself that?
No, I feel that way. I think that's part of the reason they were comfortable trading Taylor is that they had Morris who could kind of flip around and be a versatile piece, especially if Draymond Jones gets hurt. I think he's a great guy to kind of roster mirror Draymond Jones. I think he's a perfect backup for him. Yeah. So the numbers really, I think, are pretty good in his favor. I think almost Miles Adams might make the team now.
Maybe. I just don't understand. I saw someone else say that. I don't see how that makes sense. Miles Adams is a defensive end. He's not a nose tackle. He can't play inside, really. I know the coaches like him, but I just think he's a practice squad guy. If anything, I believe they're going to try to like get another nose tackle, like a true nose tackle. That would make some sense, but that person's not on the roster.
And that would knock him off the roster. So
yeah,
we saw your article yesterday, and Brady hinted that they're looking at a backup D tackle. I think Matt Gotel was going to make the team.
Yep.
And so I think if they do that, that'll end up pushing Adams off the roster.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. There is the back of the cornerback room. Now you've got rid of Mike Jackson. Nehemiah Pritchett, I think, is in decent shape there, although I have not been super impressed. DJ James and Lance Boykin is a guy to watch there as well, and battling out there. So there's a few. I mean, obviously Jamie Sheriff is a guy that maybe toward the top of the list for me, that he looks too good. So I'm like, he was not this effective in college. Why is he all of a sudden just blowing up in the pros? So I am curious to see if that continues, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to do, for folks that don't know, 7:00 tonight, there will be a watch party. Well, technically it'll kind of just be a hangout. So we'll be in here, and I will be in chat. I'll probably be sharing my screen and just my notes as I'm typing them, so that people that want it separated from chat can see that, but we'll figure it out together. I'm going to try to have a few fun little flourishes to make it a little more entertaining, but looking forward to hanging out tonight. We do have a super chat from Kevin Camacho, our new member. He says, any idea if Michael Barrett will play tonight? Mike McDonald did not commit one way or another, but the implication was that he will play tonight. I think that there's a decent chance he will. Oh my gosh, Jeff, here we go. Detail oriented, another 10 Hawk Blogger memberships, man. Detail, unreal. Thank you so much. Please heal up. Take care of yourself. We're all, thinking about you and cheering for you. So I will be using the gimbal tonight for post game. So appreciate that as well. So appreciate all that you're doing there. Okay. Jeff, anything else before we wrap? Anything else across the NFL? Anything else that's on your mind?
Well, Russell Wilson's playing right now. He's battling for his starting.
Oh, is that game on right now?
That game just started. But I'm going to call out Russell. A clip surfaced from one of our listeners, Legion of Brazil, where it almost seemed like Russell was taking credit for Josh Cashman's career. And Josh is obviously a super talented guy working with everyone. Russell did. I didn't like that, Russell. I didn't like that. If anything, Josh made you better. So, Russell, if you're a Schadenfreude guy and don't like Russell, there's a great Stephen A. Smith clip from this week of him and Dan Orlovsky and Damian Woody are on there. They're like dying of laughter, trying to contain themselves, where Stephen A. is just basically calling the guy out and saying, your career's on the line. Like, what are you smiling for all the time? Like, people paid you $40 million to go away. Like, you've become an embarrassment, and like your Hall of Fame career is on the line, and you're out here smiling all the time, acting like everything's great. Like, show some heart, man. And like, then I see Russell kind of goofing off about Josh, and I'm like, all right, man, like, stop stealing our guy. So I'm going to defend Josh here, even though he probably loved that clip.
Yeah, that was cool to see, man. Cashman is the best. He's so talented, always has been, has not needed anyone to make his career what it is. And if anything, Josh has just needed a little push in the right direction to know how good he is. And it's nice to see good people succeed. And Josh is definitely one of those. Jeff, all right, man. Last thing I will say, I see someone saying that they're going to leave to go cram for their fantasy draft. I highly recommend you subscribe over at ftnfantasy.com with promo code Hawks before you do, because they have Discord groups where you can ask any question. They have cheat sheets for your draft. You will not regret it. Under $8 a month if you use promo code Hawks. Head over to ftnfantasy.com. Use that promo code. You will not regret it. Jeff, I will let you go. Thanks for the weekly chat. We will talk more soon. For everybody else, I want to say thank you to PGZ206. 5 more memberships given away, man. I know this is at least the second time PGZ has done it. I so appreciate you, man. Thank you for being so generous, and thanks for growing the community. Love it, love it, love it. And thanks to everybody who's been on today. Thank you for liking and subscribing. If you haven't already, we're trying to get to 12,000 subscribers before the season starts. So do that. I'm also really trying to grow over at Instagram. And so just getting started on Instagram this year. We're like just over like 500, maybe 600 followers. Love to get to 1,000 followers. If you could just launch Instagram, go over to Hawk Blogger and like it, would greatly, greatly appreciate that. Otherwise, I will see, I think all of you, most of you, tonight for the game. I will be at the press box. I won't be able to have my video on, but I will be chatting live, live tweeting essentially within the chat. So come on over 7 o'clock tonight. We'll have some fun together. Appreciate you all. All right, everybody. I'm Brian Nemhaus. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. This has been episode 153 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care.